people are friendly, outgoing, demonstrative. Hard to find an introvert, I would say. Because, again, lots of people, they have the outdoor lifestyle, so you're constantly in contact with people, and it causes you, therefore, to be more outgoing or more engaged. So could be somebody who sitting with you playing dominoes there. You know, Brazil just scored a goal in the international game. When I was living in Recife, and people would watch the football games on television, when Brazil scored, they would run outside and shoot guns into the air. I'm not kidding. You know, I actually understood the smoking gun, because when you shoot, there's this little curl of white smoke comes. People are running past the window. Brazil has just scored a goal. So you have probably heard of, people here say carnival, but it's pronounced carnival, okay? And so carnival in Brazil is this no-holds outdoor parade and party that happens just before Lent in the Catholic Church tradition. So it's over now for this year, but it is an experience in and of itself. Now I got to tell you, Christian people in churches will say, if you go to Carnival, you will be expelled from the church, because it is like a 4 or 5 day crazy street party, and it shows lots of flesh. It's involved with very free, loved hookups and things like this, and so on. But what you will find is that it's this spirit of this joie de vivre, or this feeling of being a person who enjoys every aspect of their life. Now, it just occurs to me something else about Carnival is that poor people want to have a moment in their life where they don't have to suffer all the time, where they want some pleasure too. And so it's not unusual for poor people to sacrifice even from what little they have, so that they can have a fancy costume at Carnival and for one day be somebody. Like I cannot overstress how this touches me, how to be somebody who's like everybody else and who has a respectable place, that you'd be willing to go hungry for a week so that you could have a fancy costume, or people that go out and recycle stuff in the garbage, or Brazilian people, like, well, whoever is poor uses their creativity in this way, but you cannot imagine what people can do with recycled stuff. So, the light bulb goes out. We don't throw it away. We get that light bulb, and you think, I'll just cut the top off, take the little curly bit on the bottom, put some glue, stick it on a piece of wood, fill it up with oil, a little wick. I've got a candle. I got light for the home I can sell. Oh, old car tires. You're not throwing that in the dump. We get it, we split it apart, and we make the bottoms for sandals or shoes out of that, or who knows what we can do. Coconuts that are recycled to make all kinds of vessels for the kitchen, or purses, or just, it really showed me how much necessity drives us to be creative, and so on. And we don't access a lot of our creativity because everything's just handed to us when we buy it. Oh, you got enough money, you don't have to think about inventing anything, you just... So, how people live and how they orient their lives around special events, and particularly in the public sphere with Carnival. Well, just a little bit more about worldview and belief. Some things I thought would be helpful for you to focus on. Life is in the here and now. You will find that people are very present focused. And so what this means is that for most people, they have what sociologists would call like a stuff and starve mentality. And so it means that whenever you get something, you try to use it then, because you don't know if another time is coming where you can when you'll be able to have that same thing again. So suppose you get food. Well, just if you don't know that you got a place to keep it, you consume it all, even if it's too much in the here and now, and then to starve later. But at least in one moment you've had a full belly, or you've enjoyed something to the full. A stuff and starve mentality means that people think about what they can do in this daily cycle. Like for most of us, if I asked you, what's your plan for the future? Oh, you could regale me with, when I graduate, and then in 5 years, and by the time I'm 40, that's how we think. But if you live in a society where very many people struggle to make ends meet from day to day, the future is tomorrow. You live for a 24-hour cycle. If I can get up today and feed my family and have them be healthy and let them do well at school, and me be able to provide food and clothing, whatever is necessary, for that to get us through today, and for then us to go to sleep at night without any cares and concerns. Wow, I've done my job. And then tomorrow I do it all again. So I think ahead only 12 hours, 24 hours, a couple weeks. The longest term investment lots of people have is a lottery ticket. Maybe I'll win the big one. But lots of people don't have bank accounts. The people you will be meeting, they'll be middle and upper class people, but do not overlook the vast majority of the people in the nation who would represent those who are in the working class and struggling in this way. Education for many people is a lower priority, a lower premium in life. Why? Not because Brazilian people don't want education. They do, and you'll meet lots of educated Brazilians. But many people do not see education as a necessity or a benefit for their families. Why? Because the payoff is too long down the road. If I send my kids to school for 12 years, are you kidding? By then, we'll all be dead. We need to get food on the table today. So if I can get my kids to school for 3 years, and then they can go out and do tricks on the sidewalk and beg for money, or maybe they'll help us in the fields to plant and harvest the crops. And if they can go back to school later, pretty good. There's a group that I know that's a Christian group. What they did to try to alleviate this situation was that and they've been working now for a number of years, so that it's tried and true. They sponsored families with full, free medical help if they would keep their children in school. And now that is a huge benefit to families, because not having to pay for like glasses or any kind of medical help, dentistry, the whole bit. So if they would be willing to really fight to keep their kids in school, as long as the children remained in school, the entire family got free medical benefits. This has helped people graduate from high school and go on to be able to help their families in other ways. So just to understand how people might feel in this way. We see that Brazil falls into this category of much of the Latino way of thinking, which means there is an unsystematic universe. Now, in the Western North American world, we have a systematic universe, which forces us to symmetry in everything. Heaven forbid that the tables should be unaligned here. We got to get everything in order. We like symmetry in art or in music. We like to balance things out. We think that looks good. But an open system of logic, where we have not a systematic but an unsystematic universe, is where we don't feel that we have to have balance in our art or our music. Like Brazilian art has more fluidity, more movement than symmetry. The kinds of things philosophically that we feel we need to balance, like the sovereign will of God versus human desire, or I don't know, what are some of the conundrums we have that we feel we always need to explain? Predestination versus human responsibility, or something like this. Even, prayer. Why pray if God's going to do what He's going to do anyway? How come children suffer in the world? We feel the need to resolve all these issues. We write huge books and have conferences to try to explain how I can prove to you that God exists through 10 handy-dandy steps and so on. But Brazilian people don't feel so much that they need to do that. There is a more open system of logic, that there are mysteries in the universe that we cannot solve, and we should not. We don't have to be convinced that God exists, because if we understood and could prove that God exists, then God would be reduced to our level. So we should embrace the mystery of God rather than try to prove things about who He or it is. So it's an untidy universe, but it provides for people to feel like they can go with the flow, that they're not constrained. They feel a resignation to forces greater than themselves. Almost, you can say a kind of, maybe a kind of cross between fatalism and sort of throwing yourself upon the will of the divine or of the Creator. So people are easy to talk to. They don't have a closed way of thinking, and don't understand our need to always have everything in nice little resolved boxes. This means also that people have a natural spirituality about them. And spirituality is central to much of the Brazilian mindset. Do not be afraid to talk to somebody or say, God has blessed me or done something for me, or I thank God for this. People will look at you earnestly and they'll say, wow, yeah, tell me about that. Really? They won't scoff. They won't just dismiss or feel uncomfortable if you introduce the subject of religion into a conversation. No. Here are folks that are very comfortable with talking about spirituality. Now, in terms of classic religion in Brazil, Brazil is both the world's largest Catholic nation and the world's largest Spiritist nation. So, Spiritism, this is the Afro-Brazilian cults. So it's tribalism that came to Brazil from Africa with the peoples that were brought as indentured workers, and then it sits alongside classic Roman Catholicism. So an image like this, if you've been to Mexico, you've probably seen the Virgin of Guadalupe. This is a common image of Catholicism throughout the Americas. So you might see something like that, and you'll see people very devout in their Catholic faith, many of them. But at the same time, they might be doing something like this. This is actually a Spiritist center in Salvador, and here these ladies are dressed up, and they're doing a special ceremony that honors an Afro tribal god, and so on. So I put here religious syncretism, where high and low religion mix. So the high classical European religion and the low religion, it's not low because it's less important, but it means it maybe doesn't have a holy book, or it doesn't have a written history, so it's an oral tradition probably. These things mix together. And so people would be highly offended if you suggested they weren't regular Catholics. And yet they are participating in some of the Afro-Brazilian groups. The decline of classic Roman Catholicism is very much felt in Brazil. I just put the stats here. In 1980, 9 out of 10 Brazilians described themselves as Catholic, but that number has dropped by a percentage point a decade subsequently. So in 2010, only 6 out of 10 Brazilians considered themselves Catholics. And so, very much like in North America, people are seeing themselves as spiritual people, but perhaps not so much identified with a church. Okay, just because time is short here, I'll show you these other slides, and then if we'll stop, I can run it back if you like. evangelicalism has risen by leaps and bounds in Brazil, and these are just two very large evangelical charismatic meetings that took place in Brazil recently. So in Belo Horizonte and also in Rio de Janeiro. And so many people who would have the same sensibility that we would share here at Trinity, you would see in Brazil. And there's a whole story behind that. I just thought I'd show you this picture. This is a very well-known church in Sao Paulo. And they had to construct it. This is a reconstructed church in this very unusual shape because there were so many people in the church that were clapping rhythmically, and it weakened the structure. You know how when soldiers walk across a bridge, they don't walk in formation, but they tell them to just walk rather than march, because the bridge can fall down, yes? And do you remember in Abbotsford a couple of years ago, the floor fell out from the Bakerview Church there because of all the, they were in a mosh pit, I guess. There's some of the kids there for a special meeting. But the same idea. This church, there were so many people clapping in unison that the building began to give way, and so they had to make this structure to accommodate the vigorous worship of the church. Well, the last thing I want you to know is that the people of Brazil have a contagious enthusiasm and a contagious optimism. And I almost put here on the slide, in spite of everything, because this is a country that's growing and learning and changing and morphing and having all kinds of stresses and strains. But Brazilian people seem to have a resilience about them, a joy about them, an optimism and an enthusiasm that I think you will find infectious. And I want you to totally enjoy your travel study in Brazil. I think you will have an awesome experience. Tudo bem? Tudo bem. Right on. Thank you.